Good evening, I'm Manai Lichtenstein. Welcome to tonight's Q&A,
where senior members of Ben Uri will be taking questions about our future and our digital strategy. With us this evening is David Glasser, Chair of Ben Uri and Head of Digital, Sarah McDougall, Director of Ben Uri Gallery and Museum, Rachel Dixon, Senior Research Manager of the Ben Uri Research Unit, and Emma Hollenby, our Arts and Health Programme Manager. In a moment, David will take the floor and give you a short introduction to our recent history before we take questions. If you would like to ask a question, please use Zoom's hands up feature. I or my colleague Camilla, who's working behind the scenes, will give you permission to unmute so that you may ask your question to a panel member of your choice. Due to the size of this event, please do keep your questions succinct. Thank you. This meeting will be recorded for potential output on our digital platforms. If you do not want to be on camera, please turn off your camera. Once again, thank you for attending, and I hope you enjoy tonight's evening. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Manai. Very warm and good evening to everybody. Tonight happens to be a very special night for a very sad reason, being that it is the first anniversary of the lockdown. And I think we should just spend, I know we've probably spent a minute already, but spend just a few seconds putting into context this evening, because for everybody here, Ben Uri is incredibly important. But within the context of a pandemic, and in this country, 126,000 people who have lost their lives, I think it creates its own context, and I think we just need to remember that too. So let's just spend 5 seconds of silence, and then we will kick off. Okay, we've got 125 people tonight, or at least 125 bookings. We may have 200 people viewing in, and that's fantastic. And thank you all for joining us. I want to be very brief because we've only got an hour, maybe an hour and 5 minutes if Manai allows us to stretch over. I'm sure most people here will want to ask something or other, or something will stimulate a question. So let me give you the briefest history of Ben Uri. It was founded in Whitechapel, in the East End of London in 1915. It's founded by an immigrant, a Jewish immigrant artist by the name of Berson, whose first language was Yiddish. His second language would be, I guess, Russian or Lithuanian these days. And his third language, I guess, would be French. And his fourth language would be English. But he certainly managed to communicate very effectively and managed to stimulate the traditional left-wing intelligentsia of the East End of London into supporting his vision in creating an art society, which actually some years later was considered to be as ambitious as the first national Jewish museum of art, which, given the fact that it, from such humble beginnings in the East End, was quite a remarkable objective and ambition. I then want to literally jump to 1995. I'm happy to talk about all the periods beforehand, or we are, but in 1995, the building, the fourth floor in the Great Synagogue in Dean Street was sold. It was sold because there was no longer a Jewish community there. Ben Uri had been on the fourth floor of that synagogue building for over 20 years, and it was sold, and Ben Uri became galleryless. It was essentially closed effectively to the public, but kept alive by a passionate board of trustees and a passionate group of volunteers and staff. It stayed closed until 2002, although we relaunched the museum in 2001 with a completely different vision for the future. We transformed it from being a Jewish community art society. It was the Ben Uri Art Society, and we rebranded it. We included the museum in our title. We repositioned it as the center of the mainstream of British culture, principally because of two reasons. One, because the previous formula didn't work. It worked in the 50s, the 60s, the 40s, the 30s, maybe even the 70s, and maybe part of the 80s, but not the second half of the 80s and not the 90s. And after all, when it closed, there were no streets, there were no riots on the streets, no peaceful demonstration to come and reopen it. It stayed closed, and there was absolutely no merit in going back and repeating the same formula, because as any cook will know, if you put the same ingredients and cook it in the same way, you'll get exactly the same result. So that was number one. But number two was, we saw Ben Uri differently. We saw Jewish artists in a wider context, because the majority of these artists were immigrants. And right from the beginning, we saw the immigrant experience as being universal. The circumstances, of course, were different, but the universality of the immigrant experience gave us a platform to develop a new Ben Uri with a new purpose, representing the community in the mainstream rather than being inside the community as a set of positionings. So that's essentially what we did in 2001 when we launched Ben Uri. We got our gallery in 2002. So after 6 years, we were back in business, if you like, back with the public engagement. And I don't want to walk you through all the different parts of the last 20 years, but I use the word walking very deliberately, because you're going to hear me certainly talk about wood and trees. And one of the great challenges of managing any institution, managing any organization, is to actually continually revisit the objectives, how we get there, and to recognize and manage to part the ways to see the wood from the trees. And that's a function which is the responsibility of the trustees, of the governance of the institution, and of the senior management. And that's a function and responsibility that has been uppermost in our minds for the last 20 years, as we try to steer Ben Uri into a long and secure future of public benefit generation. So that's as much as I want to introduce Ben Uri at this moment in time. My three colleagues, my three extraordinary, wonderful colleagues, Sarah McDougall, the director of the institution as a whole, but with great responsibility, obviously, for the collection and for the research unit. Rachel Dixon, like Sarah, been with me almost all the way for the last 18 years or so, I guess, is our senior research manager of the research unit, which is our principal artistic endeavor for the future. And Emma Hollenby, who's working with a range of different professionals in developing art interventions for the older community, particularly the 75 plus, and those living in either social isolation or with dementia. Please, the floor is open to any question on any subject, posed in any way you want to pose it. This is your meeting, and we are here to actually address it openly and frankly. And I'd like to ask, if I may, Dr. Jutta Vincent, who sent in a question, perhaps if you're there, Jutta, would you kick us off?
Yes, hi. Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, also for opening up actually this meeting to everybody who's, or for those, I don't know, who was invited, but for a larger actually audience to raise issues and concerns and also questions. I posted 2 questions in which I would be interested in because of my situation of being at the University of Birmingham and teaching art and migration, and therefore following in the great footsteps that are probably too large for me, of Shulamit Beer, who taught for a very long time art and migration at the Kurt Hoth Institute. So my first question is really about how you see the Ben Uri Gallery being involved with an academic, with universities. That means in terms of teaching, student placements, any other collaborations with the university, funding guest lecturers for university modules, and so on. And my second question would be, to which extent the gallery is involved, or whether this is an issue for the gallery, namely what is in many, what many people are interested in nowadays is the restitution and repatriation, and that obviously refers specifically to modern art. So I was wondering whether the Ben Uri Gallery is concerned about that, whether there are discussions about this, about their own collection, or also about those who have been involved in the history of the gallery and therefore are victims, so to speak, of having, in a way, of goods that were stolen from them.
Sarah, Rachel, who wants to?
Sure.
Well, so are you going to talk about the collection aspect,
Sure.
and I'll talk about the university aspect?
Okay, yeah, sure. So to answer your question about restitution, as far as we know, none of our works is affected in that way. When we are acquiring new work, we do, of course, check the art loss register, as does anybody dealing with a work that might at all be affected in that way. In a lot of cases, we do know the provenance of the works because we've inherited the collection up to a certain point. We don't have provenance for every single work, and we're always very keen to do more work to find out more about them. And of course, if we were to come across such an instance, then we would deal with it very ethically and responsibly. But to date, that has not been an issue with works from the collection. In many cases, what's happened is that we're very strong in the so-called Hitler emigre generation, and many of those artists then came to Ben Uri to sort of find refuge, in the sense of finding a platform for their work as Jewish artists. It closed at the end of 1939 until 1944, but then reopened. And so a lot of work was given after that time or purchased from the artists concerned. So in those instances, obviously, the artists themselves would have, freely sold their work or whatever. And in most cases, it was work created here. So I hope that answers your query. But of course, we would look at any cases should they arise.
Jutta, thank you for your question, and thank you for supporting Ben Uri on this journey, because obviously the study of the immigrant contribution is something you've been very involved with. So it's been great to have the benefit of your wisdom over the years. So going back to your question about university involvement, absolutely, this is something that's key to Ben Uri going forward. In our new incarnation, where digital outputs are going to be key, scholarly outputs are going to be key, the Buru database is going to be key. We're looking at opportunities, we're looking at ways of partnering with universities, and we also understand that funding streams are very much tied up with universities. And given that we're going to have to pay very, very careful attention to our funding streams, we understand that these partnerships are absolutely crucial. And we've started on that journey. We already have 2 PhD students in collaboration with different universities. And each of those PhDs is structured slightly differently in terms of our contribution, both in sort of supervisory in terms of providing archival material, supervision, et cetera, et cetera. So no, absolutely, we're looking to really have a broad engagement with universities. So looking at not just art history, but migration studies, really looking at a broad kind of cultural engagement, because Buru which is the Ben Uri Research Unit, and also the database that we're producing, although the focus is on artists, it actually goes well beyond that. So we're looking at gallerists, we're looking at restorers, at teachers, at applied artists, architects. So it's a really, really broad engagement. And all I can say really is we welcome any proposals from universities where we could look at potential partnerships, and any individual proposal will be looked at in terms of its merits and the kind of funding that might be available going forward. So we look forward to fruitful engagements.
Thank you. Minai, over to you. Any questions? Please press your hand, whatever this technical bit is, which is beyond me. But I think you can press a button and the hand goes up to ask a question, and then Minai will ask you to speak.
That's right. So our next question comes from Michael Baum. If you can unmute.
Hello, Michael.
I'm trying to, oh, yeah, can you hear me now? It's not a question, it's an answer to the previous question, because I'm a retired professor of surgery and visiting professor in medical humanities at University College London. And I've been working with Emma Holloway and David for quite a long time. My academic interest has always been evidence-based medicine. And I used to run a clinical trial center, particularly linked to cancer. So with Emma does the work, I do a lot of talking. And it's been a pleasure to work with the team at Ben Uri, who take this very seriously. We've developed outcome measures. We're interested in the evidence or creating evidence of the benefits of art for those with some cognitive decline. Can we delay cognitive decline? Can we improve the quality of life of people with cognitive decline? But right at the beginning, you had to define the outcome measure. And we've spent a lot of time developing outcome measures for quality of life and cognitive functions. And this is a direct link with the University College London. And we've been doing this for quite a while. So I welcome the fact that the first question was concerning Ben Uri linked to the universities. And yes, my goodness, we're interested in that.
Thank you. Michael, if I'm allowed to say, it's our privilege. We are the beneficiaries of our relationship. Thank you. Minai?
Up next, we've got Jasmine Allen.
Hi, sorry, bad lighting. Thank you for hosting this event this evening. I've been to some very memorable exhibitions at the Ben Uri Gallery some years ago now. And my question is really about the transformation into a virtual museum and how you will enable continued physical access to your extraordinary collections and archives for research, but also for visitors. My feeling is that encountering art online is not the same as encountering it physically in a room. So I just wanted to know a bit more about your plans in that sense.
Sarah?
Yes, well, all those things will continue to happen. So the gallery will continue to be open. We'll continue to have 4 exhibitions a year. And we welcome researchers. We're expanding our art reference library downstairs, and researchers can come in to use the library and also to access archive materials. But those are also available online. And the online offering is really, to use a favorite phrase of David's, a plus, because the online allows us to offer the exhibitions also to visitors who can't come into the gallery. Ditto, the archive online is already used by a great deal of researchers. And the Borough database that Rachel mentioned, which records the contribution, the Jewish and immigrant contribution to visual art in Britain since 1900, that will also be online. The collection has been online for many years, since 2012, and is much visited. So we really see it as being able to offer many extra facilities. So lots of the exhibitions that have been done in the past, the catalogues, the talks, and so forth, plus new initiatives like 60-second films and other initiatives by the digital department are also available, but they're not instead of. But the footprint, we have to tell you, to the gallery is very small. We have a very small amount of physical visitors, and we have a huge amount of visitors digitally. So we're serving the needs, we hope, of both communities, but we have to be realistic in that, you know, fewer people who are interested in us are actually able to visit. to the physical gallery in North London, but many of those are able to visit digitally. So we hope that this is an option where, as far as possible, we can offer the best of both worlds.
I'm sure this subject will continue to be raised. And so if I could preempt it perhaps a little bit by just giving you some context. Nobody at Ben Uri would argue that there is no substitute in terms of good, better, best. The best experience is to stand in front of an artwork and peer into it and stand back from it and simply engage with it in a physical way. Nobody's going to argue with that. But the harsh reality is that Ben Uri is one of 57% of all UK museums that is classified as small. And if you've had a chance to look at the film on the Ben Uri website that we made between the lockdowns last summer, you'll see that the justification of the whole digital project is because we can actually engage with literally 40 times as many people digitally. And for those people who can't get to Ben Uri, which is the vast majority of the world, not just in the UK now, not just in London now, but the world, can get to Ben Uri digitally. It's a global digital engagement. And if you think that's not good enough, then I would say to you that it's not as good as standing in front of the picture, although digital representation today is incredible, but I accept that it's not as good. But what about all the other people that can benefit from our engagements who don't live in Northwest London or don't visit London occasionally and then choose Ben Uri over Tate or the V&A or Tate Modern or the British Museum? For them, it is the best option. It is the first, only, and by a distance, the best option. And let me just give you one other little context to consider. There is no substitute for standing in, I was going to talk about rugby, probably not knows rugby. Football, I have no idea about football except for the fact there's 11 people and they all run around kicking a ball and they get paid huge fortunes. That's pure jealousy from my point of view, by the way. But there is no substitute for standing in the grounds of Manchester United watching Liverpool or Chelsea watching Arsenal or Spurs. There's no substitute for it. But there's only 50,000 people doing that. But there's 10 million people watching it on Match of the Day or on Sky or BT, whatever it is. So the concept that it can only be the intimacy of the physical engagement is no longer actually relevant anymore. It's no longer robust. Society and technology has changed all that, and the pandemic has turbo-changed that policy, which we evolved in 2018 when everybody thought we were completely bonkers. Not so many people think that now. So I just wanted to give you a context, if you like, of thinking between the digital engagement and the physical engagement. And then one other piece of context just for you, because it just comes to mind. We received an email today from a company called Wegalot. I think it's called Wegalot. A month ago, we put on the facility to translate our website into Russian, Chinese, Indian, Polish, and German. And we had 1,093 people who used that translation service last month. That is 1,093 people that we would not have engaged with. And just to put that into context, when during an average exhibition outside the opening week and the last week, you struggle to get 50 people a week through your door, it's about public benefit. May I say it's about wood and trees. So that's just to give you some of the context of why in 2017 and 18 we developed this strategy. Anyway, I'm sorry for hogging the floor. Minai.
Our next question comes from Tina Matania.
Hello, thank you. I'm really glad that you've raised the issue of digital because I was thinking that I think you're really ahead of the curve. I've got to say really thumbs up for that, because on so many levels. Firstly, we're seeing now digital art increasing, and that will be really interesting. I don't know how you feel about the development of digital art. Also ownership, electronic, how you're proving the ownership, and that creates opportunities possibly in the future, maybe not the medium term, but the longer term, for perhaps loaning digitally this art to be displayed on screens in various galleries around the world, and then creating a revenue stream from that. And also maybe part owning, because you can digitally, how should we say, you can digitally prove your part ownership of an artwork as well. So it's not necessarily just buying a whole artwork that you own for Ben Uri. So that again, I think is a very interesting development that could happen in the future. And also just touching on what you were saying as well, if you can just talk about how you feel about I think it's a great opportunity. For example, if you're looking at rural populations and populations around the world who don't even have knowledge of this artwork, to actually inspire them to really get into discovering this artwork and the stories behind it. And I also want to congratulate you on expanding your strategic view to look at immigrants as a whole, because it really opens up your audience. And I know there's probably controversial views about it, but I think it's still, you can keep the essence of the origin of Ben Uri, and actually, you know, putting that forward in a very positive way, and expanding it further as well to people who actually didn't even realize they had part Jewish heritage as well, when they start to look at this and discover it. So really just congratulations, but just thinking about how you're thinking about this digital global marketplace, if you like, expanding in the future in terms of ownership and loans of work as well. Thank you.
Sarah will talk about the whole loan system, because we're on that. But can I just talk about the immigrant focus? I started off by trying to very briefly explain that there was no merit in trying to replicate what had failed previously, and we had to find a new formula to actually develop our future in a distinctive way. And my colleagues are the professional scholars, and I'm the usurper coming from the corporate and business world 20 years ago. So for me, the evaluation was about market size. Very simply, I mean, if the Jewish community, the statistics are very simple. There was in the 2011 census and 2001 census, because they didn't change, around 250,000 members of the Jewish community in the UK, of which 150,000 to 170,000 were in the Greater London area. If you then split London, as one does in New York, into five different segments, you've got centre, north, south, east, and west. If you took centre, north, then you ended up with about 100 out of the 150,000. There were, at that stage in 2000, when we were developing this formula, there were already 2 million immigrants in London. Where would you want to sell your product? To a market size of 150,000, which includes everybody from newborn to those people who had their telegrams from the Queen, or a potential interested market of 2 million. 2 million, by the way, is now over 3 million, but that's a separate issue. So it was exactly about taking the opportunity to maximize public benefit and exploit our unique heritage, but within a wider context of immigration and the immigrant. And that's why the Ben Uri Research Unit, which we've actually been researching for damn near 20 years, but we formalized it in 2018 into the Ben Uri Research Unit for the study and recording of the Jewish and immigrant contribution to British visual culture since 1900, which is exactly where the Ben Uri collection lies. But of course, it allows other artists from other immigrant communities to be included, so that we are assessing their contribution amongst their artistic peers, not necessarily their religious brethren. So that's what I want to talk about. But Sarah, I know will answer the question, Tina, on the other areas.
Well, in terms of the collection being available, so we are listed on various sites, and we take inquiries through the website. So we're always happy to loan works as widely as we can, as long as, you know, facilities and security at the venues can support the loans and they can be insured accordingly. So we do loan very widely now, and we will always continue to do that. In terms of what you were talking about further from that, sort of the development of digital art and ownership and so forth, I mean, yes, that's a whole new world, and I think, like everybody else, we're sort of on the edge of that. So we don't have any experience of that at the moment, but you know, everything is an opportunity, and we would look at everything that arose and you know, try and work out if it was the right opportunity for us, and if we could afford to do it and see the right benefit to our visitorship, both physical and digital, in doing that. So yes, we would be happy to look at embracing new opportunities, but it isn't something we've done as yet.
Can I just add to that in terms of sort of digital exhibition? If you go onto the website, so benuri.org is the other sort of key platform, and there you'll see that there are many different exhibitions presented digitally, and in different digital formats. So you could look simply at an image, or if you wanted a more in-depth experience, you could look at exhibition images with captions, and the possibility of even a sort of 3D walkthrough, and then a more kind of conventional digital catalogue that's illustrated, that you're perhaps familiar with through sort of mainstream galleries. So we are looking at these different digital platforms and of offering the visual experience in many different ways digitally.
If anyone wants to ask me on the digital side what we're doing, I'll be very happy to expand.
Our next question comes from Paul Crossley.
Okay, thank you very much. Over the years, I've done quite a bit of research on Edwardian drama and literature, and taught some courses on it. I can tell you, I had no idea until somebody asked me in the Jewish community here in Cambridge about the Jewish contribution to art. And I started to look around, and I found Mark Gertler and I found David Bomberg, and the roads lead on to Jacob Kramer and Leon Kossoff. I'm really just starting out to find out about this. And I just wondered what I could do. Do I contact you? Do I look through your resources? I'm an independent researcher, and so I'm really a novice in the area. It's not my field, but I'm very interested, and I'm hoping to give a talk on this to community here later in the year, and also to write an article about it and the various other connections, because it's an incredible story. Just those two alone, the immigrant experience, is just incredible. And I suppose I'm just saying, how could I sort of tap in to your resources? And that's it, really.
Sarah and Rachel will tell you more, but I would only give you one answer: benuri.org.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, we welcome your interest, and I hope you'll find lots on all those websites. So going through the main website, benuri.org, you can also look separately at the collection website. On the collection website, you'll find works by Mark Gertler, David Bomberg, Jacob Kramer, and Leon Kossoff. You'll also find little bios for them. Many of them also feature on Buru online. And because their artists are very important to us in terms of the history of the collection and the gallery, we've done many exhibitions on them over the years. So Gertler is a particular interest of mine. I did a biography on him nearly 20 years ago now. Rachel is a particular expert on Kramer. And we've also had recent exhibition on Kossoff. I've forgotten the other one. Oh, David Bomberg.
Bomberg.
We did a major exhibition on him 2 years ago. So I hope you'll find lots there. You can find iterations of most of those exhibitions on digital platform on benuri.org. You can find copies of the exhibition catalogues. I'm not sure if they're all there. The issue page of benuri.org. and then works in the collection and corresponding entry. But if you look at all that and you have some questions, then do write to Rachel and me, and we'd be very, very happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Our next question
Are
comes.
you still there?
Yes. Our next question comes from Arthur Moit Abrams. If you could unmute.
Yeah. Hello, hello. Can you see me? Hi there. Yeah. Well, I totally understand and support the. I've got another device. I totally understand and support all this about the video and the numbers involved and so on. However, I'm a painter myself, as Ben Uri is, and I want to stand up in defence. The few against the many, all the people, the millions who can see the video and all that. The poor
sorry to interrupt you.
Love, as you said, the poor artist would love his work to be seen, as has been said by David. Personally, what about that? And you've got a very small space left because the space downstairs is being used by the research centre. So I just want to put a flag up for the poor artists who still would like to see his work seen physically, even by, if it's only a very small number of visitors, because that's the reality of it, understandably.
Okay. Okay, can everybody hear me again? Because I was hearing a terrible echo. So I think Marsha Abrams is flying the flag for the artist and saying that they want to see their creativity, they want to see their creative works on display and being enjoyed and engaged with by the general public. And I say hear to that. But the reality doesn't allow it. That's the bottom line. It doesn't allow it in Ben Uri, and it doesn't allow it in Tate Modern, and it doesn't allow it at MoMA, and it doesn't allow it at any other museum or gallery in the world, unless its space is designed to fit a certain amount of works that reflect it. And the point that you raise, Marsh, is a much bigger issue, if you'll forgive me, because I want to, rather than remove it to you and your work, yes, which I fully understand, but I want to talk about it from an artist point of view and the role of the museum and collecting. One of the things that we did when we took over in 2001 and we relaunched the museum was we had a huge passion for improving the collection. And we created a very definitive list, and we, by hook, line, or sinker, we went out to find really good examples of these artists and add them to the collection. It took us some years, it took us to 2015 to actually recognize that our vision, that which we've been building towards, which was a huge building in central London to match the great nationals, so that it would be a significantly sized and very well located building in the center of London, or Whitechapel, either, would have had space to display 200, 300, 400 works perhaps. Actually, it was a pipe dream. We failed. Thank the Lord that we failed, because otherwise we would have the biggest headache that anybody would have running an independent museum of that size. But what we also realized was that we were adding works, and every time that we added a work to the collection, given the fact that our display space did not change, we were actually, there was a domino effect, and we were nudging another work into long-term store. It's simply mathematics. It's simply arithmetic. If you don't increase your display space and you keep adding to your content, simply nudges at the other end of the scale a work into long-term store. And we realized that we actually weren't doing anybody involved the service that we thought we were. And we re-evaluated our collecting policy and our collection policy. And we created a matrix. It's in the 2018 strategic document, which is online, to avoid the very situation that my good friend, Mr. Abrams, is talking about. Because no museum exhibits any artist's work on a permanent basis unless they are, shall we say, their signature dishes, their signature works. We have our own preeminent collection of 100 works, the most important works in our collection. But it's simply not possible to exhibit them the whole time. And one of the things that we had to realize was that actually the space that we had, principally the ground floor space, was not enough to attract 20,000 people a year to our building. That's just the reality of it. But we were buying works and we were acquiring works and we were given works which we accepted. We refused 90% of them, but we probably accepted 10%. And they were actually destined for store. And we stopped that and we created a matrix based on our criteria of collecting. So the first generation immigrant artists, the second generation immigrant artists, those artists that were affected by the Holocaust, the École de Paris, of which we have some holdings. And these, we have a set number of artists that we need against each criteria, because that gives us some form of opportunity to ensure that at some stage or another, we can exhibit them physically. They're online 24/7. All works in our collection, as Sarah said, nearly 10 years ago, we actually put the whole collection online. But we no longer hoover work. And if somebody offered us as a really interesting work that we've got 6 by the artist already, but it's not as good as the top 2, we will refuse it. Because we're not actually doing anybody any favor. We're not actually enhancing either the artist or the artwork by accepting a work into the collection and putting it into store. And the reality is that you show your best works. Unless there's a specific thematical element to an exhibition where actually another one of these artists' works can actually be exhibited within context. So I'm afraid the reality is that what an artist wants is not something that a museum or gallery can offer. The best way for an artist to have their work on show 24/7 all the time is in somebody's home and their guests see the picture. But it can't happen for the vast majority of artists. It's just not physically possible. And that's the harsh reality of it. And that's the reality that we faced head on, and we addressed it.
Thank you, David. Our next question comes from Joanne Shaw.
Can't hear.
I'm sorry, Joanne, we can't seem to hear you at all very well.
Could she put the question in the chat?
The chat's closed, but you're welcome to send a question directly to me, I'm Manai Lichtenstein, or to one of our panel members if you'd like for us to read out.
Could I just try again?
Oh, we can hear you.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's great. Sorry about that. So what I was going to say was I've been involved with the Ben Uri a little bit for a very long time and was incredibly excited when you took the decision to go to embrace the immigrant experience and to link the experience of Jewish artists with other immigrants and their contribution to the visual art of the UK. And I think that's fantastic. Not only for the marketing reasons that David described, which are very powerful, but also because I think it builds a bridge between the Jewish community and other immigrant communities, which I think is enormous importance. My question is, I sort of assume that one of the reasons that Ben Uri has survived all this length of time is a feeling by the Jewish community that it's ours. You know, we care about the Ben Uri, it belongs to us, we support it. And of course, you know, the heritage being supporting originally Jewish immigrant artists. So my question is there a tension between that direction of linking the experience of Jewish immigrant artists and their contribution with other immigrant communities, which I think is so exciting? Is there a tension between that and continuing to hold on to the special place in the Jewish community and the love and affection and indeed financial support of the Jewish community for Ben Uri, which seems to be so important in its long-term sustainability? Can you do both? And if so, how?
Joanne, thank you. I'm going to answer one part and ask Sarah to answer the second part. I'm going to answer the question as to ownership and the sense of belonging by the Jewish community and their financial support. And Sarah will address the academic issue of how we maintain the Jewish heritage and the Jewish identity within that wider subject. So Joanne, I'm afraid to tell you that the evidence does not support your premise that the Jewish community at large feels sense of ownership, nor has it ever actually financially supported Ben Uri properly, or at least properly in terms of what Ben Uri needs. Please search our archives. You will see time and time again references of Ben Uri being broke, can't actually fix the roof, has operated on volunteer staff. And I can tell you that the end proof is that we thought that the Jewish community would look at Ben Uri very differently if we completely professionalized it, if we operated at this, as we described it internally, as Tate Jewish rather than anything else. But the reality is it didn't. And for a long time, we thought it was us. We thought we weren't pitching it correctly. Our presentation skills were not honed in enough in terms of development. But I'm afraid to say it was exactly the same thing for the Jewish Museum. And the reality is that in January 2001, the Jewish Museum essentially went belly up. They required a bailout of over £1 million by the Arts Council England to actually survive. And it so happens from a timing point of view, actually it happened in November, but that's it wasn't announced until January and February. Well, if the Jewish community does not feel able or inclined to prioritize a Jewish museum, then forgive me, what chance Ben Uri operating within the mainstream, addressing the Jewish and immigrant experience? Jewish Museum lost money for every year post its development. Total of £2.5–3 million over the last 3 years. Talking very serious amounts of money. Plus a development that cost nearly 15 million. Put the two together, you're talking 25–27 million pounds. And nothing to show at the end. So the reality that the Jewish community has ownership and feels ownership, I'm afraid to say, doesn't stand up. I wish it did. But then to be fair to the Jewish community, it is an incredibly philanthropic community. And it has tremendous demands on its funds. And it focuses its attention on care and education. Now, we have a care division in terms of our arts and health side, and I hope somebody's going to test Emma and get her to explain more about it, because it really is incredibly important to us. But we have that, but the Jewish community does not view its Jewish cultural heritage in the artistic or religious side, the community side, as importantly as it does its care and education. And I respect that, and I accept that. And we recognized that 20 years ago. Another reason why we moved into the center, because there was absolutely no evidence either from Ben Uri or from the Jewish Museum that actually the community funded it. So that's the harsh reality. You only need to look, if anybody thinks I'm exaggerating the situation, go to Companies House or the Charities Commission website and look at the reports. You'll see it, it's all there. And we realized in 2016 that 3 of our 4 principal supporters were aging, not necessarily in good health, and that made us vulnerable. That the trustees recognized put us in a very vulnerable position. We saw the wood from the trees. We recognized that we had to actually address what could happen, so that in the old adage, you hope for the best, but you plan for the worst. Of course, we hope for the best, but we plan for the worst. And very regrettably, I have to tell you that not only were we right in our judgment strategically in terms of what we produced, but these 3 major donors to Ben Uri, unfortunately, are no longer with us. So that's the trustees' role, to actually look ahead, plan ahead, and cater and address the worst scenario and hope for the best. But it's certainly no evidence. It wasn't the Jewish community, to my knowledge, that came up with £1.5 million in January and February of 2020 for the Jewish Museum. It was the Arts Council England. So all these different ideas of merging here and merging there. Look at the accounts of all the Jewish charities, of the cultural charities, including JW3. None of them are generating surpluses. They're all struggling to make ends meet and working very hard to do so. They do a great job, but they're working very hard to keep balanced accounts. Sarah, over to you. I'm sorry for hogging that one, but it needed to be said.
Well, in terms of how we maintain and support Jewish heritage and identity in our scholarship, that's very key still to what we do and always will be, both the Jewish and the immigrant story, because we see the Jewish history as one proud story within the wider history of immigration to the UK. So that is honoured, if you like, through still the greater number of our artists are of Jewish heritage, and that is made explicit in their biographies and on both the collection site and the borough site. We have done a lot of work on our archives. Rachel in particular has been responsible for lots of in-depth work on our archives, and we've digitized our archives. Those are now available via the borough site and via the main site also, of course. And so our Jewish history can be visited through that, both through individual records, and you can see the whole archive. So it remains very important. It's at the heart of everything that we do, and it is recognised and honoured in all our scholarship and in all of our sites.
Thank you, Sarah. Our next question again comes from Tina Matania. There we go.
Me again. On a totally different subject, and this is something that you can't do anything about, but when I visited a few years ago now, the Neue Pinakothek in Munich, I went there to see works of Max Liebermann specifically, and I was very green and sort of looked on loan to the museum. On loan from who? Well, obviously it's on loan because the artwork is effectively stolen during the war. So they can't prove who it was owned by or whatever. And I'm sure there are a lot of these works. And it kind of raises the question that on the upside, these museums are keeping these works, they're caring for them, they're in a well-maintained and securitized environment. However, on the downside, how is that sort of benefiting the future generations of those who perished? So my question would be, really, I think it would be lovely to see at some point in the future these museums taking more accountability for these revenue streams coming in. I went specifically to see Liebermann. That was my reason. Yes, we had lovely, beautiful artworks there, but I went specifically for that. So I think it would be great if at some point in the future I know they've been approached, but to say, okay, part of our revenue stream will actually go to somebody like Ben Uri, who are, you know, looking at this from a historical perspective, not just, oh, that's a pretty picture and here's my ticket price. So I'm sure lots of people have raised this question before, but just as somebody who was quite surprised at the history and situation of that, I think that would be a nice thing for some of these bigger museums to do for somebody like Ben Uri at some point in the future, even if it's just 0.25% of a month's takings. That would be great. I think. Will it ever happen? Probably not. But
Tina,
that would be great.
Tina, from your lips to the Lord's ears.
I hope so.
But don't put your month's salary on it.
No. It would be nice though, you know, to raise the question and maybe have the media say, well, you know, wouldn't it be nicer if you would actually do this?
I think
that would be great.
I think I would be happier if these museums that have got works that were in fact looted and are recorded looted, but there's no heirs, if you like,
yes.
If they would find a way of actually recognizing the heirs on their labels. I would happily give up the 0.25% to see it recorded properly.
Riders on the Beach was one, wasn't it? It was discovered very recently before the gentleman passed away.
Look,
yeah.
You know, if I may give the collection a plug, we have a most wonderful Max Lieberman self.
I saw it, yes. I saw it. Very good.
Okay.
And
Thank
I
you.
can say that one's on loan, but not for any not from any dodgy unrestituted place. A very respectable lender.
We know the problem.
Say all our works on loan are from very respectable lenders to whom we're very grateful.
Wonderful. We have no more questions incoming unless there's anyone would like to submit one shortly before we close tonight's event. We've got.
I would like to say something and ask something. Can I like to ask a question? Is that allowed, Minai?
Questions to follow you, David, just to let you know.
I saw flashing across my screen, somebody said, why don't you merge with JW3? Which usually the question is, why don't we merge with the Jewish Museum? Or why don't we merge with JW3 and there? So let me just very simply address the issue of mergers. I have some experience in mergers in my previous life. Merging unsuccessful organizations financially rarely ever produces a financially successful organization. That's number one. Number two is that, again, it's the same business. You have to, if you're going to merge, I think there's far more merit in the Jewish Museum when it comes back in merging its back office with JW3 that rather than Ben Uri, which is a museum which we have climate control, we have exhibitions, we have scholarship, we have a whole range of different disciplines that people who are outside the museum sector don't understand and they have no need to understand it. And JW3, which was set out, by the way, solely as a Jewish community center, and now is a much wider exercise because it has to be to try to survive. That's not a good mix. So, but merging institutions in the hope that it will try to think of the right way to put this. Putting two institutions together does not guarantee a pedigree. Let's put it that way. And the second question I want to ask is, I want somebody to ask Emma about our arts and health. And if you don't, I will, because it's such an amazing and important story. And it's about using art differently and effectively to a demographic that's going to double in size, doubling exponentially in size over the next 20 years. We are an aging community and society, and this work is key to that. So I go back to Minai, and then she will decide who's going to ask what. Okay.
Our next question comes from Claire Robinson.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were near the end. Sorry.
Hello. I've specifically come online to ask Emma actually about arts and health because I'm a trainee arts therapist. So I was just joining your meeting to find out more, and I wondered how Emma had been running the programme this year with COVID-19. So I'd be interested to know what she's been doing over the last year maybe, and has she been able to do much and go and see people in these times.
Thank you, Claire.
Yes.
And yay, get a chance to talk about BUA now. So yes, we have been managing to do some work over the past year, and really we were doubly impacted. So the programme that probably most applies to you is called Starting with Art, and it's been running for 7 years. It's a programme in which we support trainee art therapists. So we take them from the university and we place them with the settings that we're looking to work with. So older people's settings, day centres and care homes, that kind of thing. So we had that model kind of well established, that we would send the trainee in to work with copies of the Ben Uri collection, and that those artworks would act as a stimulus to the therapeutic work that was happening over this long-term placement. So that is the primary project that's managed to carry on happening in real life, not in real life, via remote sessions this year. So we have still managed to work with people. I've got 7 trainee art therapists on placement at the moment who are working with, minimum of 3, some more so, of clients each week. So it's partly down to their phenomenal reserve, these trainees, that they've worked out ways to do that. So each of them has had to be pretty creative in terms of how they use our collection online and Zoom and all different manner of things to make therapeutic work, which has to be confidential or is fairly personal, and make all that happen in communal settings like care homes. So that's been the main way in which we've reached out, and it is a programme that we're looking to continue. Obviously, as with any of these kinds of programmes, the sustainability of the funding is really central to them carrying on. So it's something we're looking at the moment, but the idea is to carry on the programme, and we now have this way of working remotely that allows us to be flexible given changing circumstances around COVID. But we also have this existing model that was very tried and tested and built on research across other complementary projects about what really works best with these audiences and how to put our collection at the heart of that. So yeah, it's been a challenging year, and the programme was kind of doubly affected because we had our first cohort of trainees were interrupted in the March, and their academic year ended, and then we took on this new cohort that were going to work remotely, but we've been carrying on.
You want to talk a little bit, Emma, about Ways into Art? I think you should. Yeah,
so Ways into Art is a programme that's kind of sprung from all that experience of working with the trainees, and also another project called Art in Residence, which was a research programme really, where we partnered with the University of West London to ask what it was about our sessions, our art discussion sessions, which are unique to us, and our art making sessions, both of which are inspired by the collection. Those were researched, and we really asked, how do they work best for people with very advanced dementia? How do they work best for the breadth of the older audience that you'd find in a typical care setting? And all that learning has culminated in Ways into Art, which was originally conceived as a way of enabling care staff to run sessions that we'd prepared that were influenced by the collection, to run them on a timescale that worked for them and a way that worked for their residents as well. And importantly, a way that was cost effective and sustainable, so they could carry on running that programme at a regularity that suited them. And with the past year, and with in particular the moves that the gallery's made towards being a digital gallery, we're looking to take that online now and looking to adapt these I think it's 60 activities altogether, 30 more resources on top of that, so well in excess of 100 different downloadable resources and film tutorials that support staff in using those. We're looking to take those online so that we can offer it to this growing demographic that David was referring to, and it kind of goes hand in hand that it's the over 75s that are growing in numbers, but also that's the point at which cultural engagement is noted to drop off. So we're looking to provide ways of re-engaging with art, whether you're in a care setting or at home with a carer, lots of different ways.
Great, thank you.
Very much, Emma. So we've got one more question as well from Jonathan Rowland.
Thank you. I was very interested in a couple of things. One is the fact that you've talked very much about immigration, and you've widened your remit about engaging with other immigrants or immigrant cultural diverse groups. So first of all, what are you doing and how are you engaging with them, and so on and so forth? And the other is that also with the Jews not supporting or reducing their support to groups like yourself or JW3 or the Jewish Museum, are there other groups that are starting to support Ben Uri? Maybe Indian, maybe Chinese, maybe European, I don't know what.
Okay, well, again, thank you, Jonathan. I'll take the second half, and Sarah will take the first half, if that's okay. I didn't say that the Jewish community is not supporting. What I said was that they don't support sufficiently to match the financial requirements or ambitions of the Jewish cultural organizations. The only Jewish cultural organization that actually washes its face in financial terms over the last 10 years, or the only two, is JW3, which has Dame Vivian Duffield as its founding supporter, and Ben Uri, if you actually look at the financial accounts. Everybody else is rather more challenged, shall we say. But I do repeat that the Jewish community is incredibly philanthropic and supports care and education as its priorities, and obviously Israel too. So their cultural offer is not as high in the priority list as we in cultural providers would prefer. In terms of whether there is the opportunity for other communities to fund us, well, of course, the answer is yes. And of course, that's part of the strategic thinking behind it. Not only is it a natural bedfellow for us, because after all, we are an immigrant community, but there are many successful members of other immigrant communities who are less established in this country, who we believe will support particularly the Ben Uri Research Unit, which reflects the contribution of their people to British visual culture. So yes, we believe that will come, and that's part of our overall funding strategy. Sarah?
So in terms of engagement, so for several years, I can't remember the exact year, but we have, since 2002, the remit has widened to include works by artists in the collection of all nationalities and ethnicities who are relevant to it. So we do have works by a wide variety of artists from different backgrounds, from the Caribbean, Indian artists, Turkish artists, many others. Of course, the examples are all escaping me now. In the work of Buru, it's also very central to what we do. Often people are both Jewish and immigrant, or from different immigrant communities. And there in Buru, we began by doing a soft launch of our Buru online database, and that shows initially a real scattering of subjects from all countries all over the world. I think there's currently representations of people from about 88 different countries. So I believe there are about roughly 200 countries, depending on the definition, 2 or 3 go in and out. So clearly there is more to do there. But in order to tackle the research in a targeted way, we are rolling out the project now incrementally over different stages. So we're beginning, in fact, by completing a tranche of work on the so-called Hitler emigre generation, which of course was contained many Jewish people, although not everyone was Jewish who was of that cohort. But that is closer, if you like, to our roots. But that will be followed by a rollout of work looking at different communities, such as the Caribbean community, Asian communities, and so on. On our exhibition program, we've also shown artists very widely over a number of years from all these communities. Rachel curated an exhibition with Indian artist Shanti Panchal last year. Rachel can give us the date in a moment of that exhibition. We are working with other members of the Indian community on other exhibitions. We have shown artists from many different nationalities, for example, in an exhibition in 2016, which was a response to our Out of Chaos exhibition by contemporary artists, and they came from all sorts of different backgrounds. So that engagement will continue, both in the exhibition work, the research we do for Buru, and those artists that we add to the collection.
Can I just pick up then with the Indian connection? So there were really sort of two initiatives last year building on this, addressing the widest immigrant communities in Britain. So we did an exhibition last summer which looked at the contribution of Indian emigre artists in the UK. That was alongside a solo exhibition of Shanti Panchal, who's an Indian emigre artist who came here on a British Council scholarship. So the engagement was there, and this happened just literally at the tipping point of COVID. So the exhibition, the Indian emigre artist exhibition, was envisaged initially as taking place in the gallery in the real world, and we would have looked to engage with the Indian High Commission and various other sponsors from the specific community. But then, of course, with COVID, it became an online offering, and therefore in some ways it reduced because it was a digital offering. We didn't end up with lots of associated events in the real world and sort of big fat catalogues. So it became a reduced offering in that respect. But we are absolutely aware of reaching out to these different communities and their different sort of cultural supporters, and absolutely that's the way forward.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. That's all we have time for today, as we've overrun. So I'll just give the floor to David to say any concluding remarks.
Thank you very much indeed, Minai. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this evening. For those who may have had their hands up and no more time, please email questions@benuri.org and we will reply to you within 24 hours and in our usual full and frank way. I only wanted to say just a few final comments, if I may. One thing which I hope has come through from this evening is that Ben Uri may be small in scale, but it's incredibly ambitious and purposeful. We're not just a gallery or a museum. We're more than that. We have to be more than that if we're going to survive and prosper. Every small business, every small line of product, niche product, has to have its own distinctive features. And we use art differently. We use art for research to create Sarah and Rachel's research unit, making a serious contribution to academia and to a wide range of different uses, whether it be students, politicians, auction houses, galleries, or owners. The record of the Jewish and immigrant contribution to 20th century and 21st century British art is a real important tool for social integration in the long term. The work that Emma is spearheading with Michael Baum and Professor Norman Willis and a whole range of other great colleagues is really important. But we're not only just from a mental and physical health point of view, but it's using our collection. It's exposing and expanding the engagement with our collection and therefore with the stories of all our artists. It's important, it's distinctive, it's different, and it's meaningful. It adds genuine public benefit. And that's what we're about. It's about seeing through the wood, seeing through the trees, identifying what is actually important. How do we create a legacy for Ben Uri in its second century that matches, if not exceeds, the great legacy that it had within the Jewish community in its first 75 years? That's what Ben Uri is about. We're doing it digitally. You may be interested to know that 1/3 of our digital engagements are from London, which you might argue that they would have come to Ben Uri anyway. 1/3 of our digital engagements are from the rest of the UK, and 1/3 are from abroad. I argue that 2/3 of our current engagements, which is roughly about 40,000 a month, are simply new business. They are new engagements. People are benefiting from our engagement, from our collection. And that's generating public benefit. And for us, public benefit doesn't have to be built around the Abbey Road. It can be anywhere in the world. We have global, unlimited possibilities, and that's our ambition. So please enjoy benuri.org. Have a look at the film on it. You'll understand better what we're saying. We're still publishing catalogs. We just, Rachel produced another exhibition. Rachel produced was on Polish artists, just produced a 150-page or 170-page exhibition catalogue of that, including Polish translations. We are digital, but we're also physical. The difference is that unlike the major museums where their business model has to be based on the physical because they've got these huge buildings and therefore they're having to deal with it. Thankfully, we failed in that ambition, and we now have these unlimited possibilities at a fraction of the cost. And one last comment, if I may. Our next digital exercise is a remarkable exhibition by a remarkable artist, David Brewer-Weil. It's called the Coviad. He only completed it, I think, a number of weeks ago because we're still locked down. But being digital allows us to launch a film about the exhibition on the 5th of April. The exhibition itself at benuri.org, this is all on benuri.org, on the 12th. The book on the 19th, and the extensive biography that Sarah and Rachel produced and their team have produced in the research unit on the 26th. Just not possible in physical terms. But the physical is still incredibly important to us. So please mark your diaries, because we reopen Ben Uri in Boundary Road on the 16th of June. Please God, and please and COVID allowing, with an exhibition about Gustav Metzger, unveiling the early years, 1945 to 1959. We can do both, we will do both, but for us, the digital is the main thrust because that's where we generate the largest engagements. But we have no intentions of giving up the physical. It is a mixed economy, and our future is very exciting, and our future is benuri.org. Please let us know any other questions you like, ask them away, but go and tell everybody about Ben Uri. It's a special organization and we need your engagement and support. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Stay safe.